Pardon me. Welcome to my live stream. Welcome to New Zealand. I know some of you are up very late. I do apologise for that, but I'm in a different country, so the time zone's a bit different. I thought this topic was going to be easy for me to prepare, and I was wrong. I can tell you now, I have about 2 pages of content that turned into 4. So it's a very complicated topic. I didn't realise just how difficult it was going to be to actually present to you. Now, if you haven't been part of my live streams, normally what I do is I put the start time for my live streams down in the description. If you don't want to watch all of my sort of setup and ramble at the very beginning, it will go down there once YouTube publishes it. But you need to make sure that you have subscribed, hit the bell button and turned on notifications, because all of my live streams go unlisted. If you're a patron, you'll get access to them. Some of you have worked out how to get hold of the archive later on, which is always great. But I do an edited version of all of my live streams. They all get punched out sort of like 2, maybe 3 days later, depending on sort of my workload at home, okay? Now with the live streams, I will talk about anything you want to talk about, particularly the topic of discussion for today, but you need to do that at the end of the live stream. So I'm going to present you with a whole lot of slides. It just makes it easier for me. I will bring back my face at the end of the presentation during the Q&A or the feedback time. I can see there are a lot of people in the room who've already started typing in stuff. I want to say hi to those people, particularly my patrons, but hi Henry, who doesn't look like he's able to stick around. Prepared to cook and survive. Who else we got here? We've got Scott's here. Overboard DM, go and check out Overboard DM's channel. He does basically reviews and shows you all of the miniatures and terrain that he has. It's quite a good channel. Dancers, hi Dancers. Yes, I have had a good look at your video content and your photos, and it looks great. I'll get to it eventually. Francis is here. Salty Soap, hi, how's it going? John's here. Who else we got here? I think with Elliot, hi Elliot. D Doom 33, how's it going? Poggy Bacon, Seth is here, and Grey Dawn is here. Okay, all right. Settle back, grab yourself a drink, and I would suggest some food, and be patient with me because it is a lot of content. Okay, there's a lot of material. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Today's topic is a Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master Guide. Don't even bother starting with me. I know I said I would stop making Lost Mine of Phandelver Dungeon Master Guides, but this question came up and I realised I hadn't answered this question, and it was quite an important question. So yes, I've made another one. So the topic for today is travelling outside of the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Okay, this is when your players decide to go away from the locations that are detailed in the adventure book, and they decide they want to go and do something else, and that can always create a whole lot of hassles. Now the things I want to talk about in this video is I want to talk about the reasons they do this, some of the issues that will be created for you, and how to solve those problems. So let's start off. There are about 3 reasons that players have their characters travel away from Phandalin and outside of the locations detailed in the adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver, and it's usually to go to one of the cities as it happens. For those of you who are wondering where they might want to go, it's usually a city. So the first reason is to buy stuff, particularly magic items, armor and weapons. But in some occasions it'll be because you have set limits as a dungeon master in Phandalin for the type of weapons, or in particular the type of armor they can buy. It might not even be magical items or magical armor or weapons. Maybe plate armor. Full plate armor tends to be one of those things that dungeon masters will say, no, you can't purchase it from Phandalin and you have to go somewhere else. So of course they start saying, well, we want to go to a city. So there's part of the reason. Number 2 is bored with the current story or the game. And I don't want you to get too upset about this as a dungeon master, because I'm going to explain what's going on here as well, and it's not the end of the world. Number 3 is people wanting to explore an urban location or simply wanting to explore something else outside of the adventure. It may have nothing to do with the adventure itself being good or bad, but simply they want more scope, more freedom to go somewhere else. So some of the issues that will crop up for you as a dungeon master. Players wanting to go to the larger cities, usually along the Sword Coast. These will be places like Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate, and Waterdeep. Now the problem with this, as you might have already guessed, is there's nothing in the adventure really on any of the cities in the adventure book. There's no detail, and really you can't expect a beginner adventure like this to have that kind of detail. That's far too much information to incorporate in a tiny little pamphlet that's essentially just over 30 pages. So as a result, it would be unreasonable to expect that kind of detail in the adventure book anyway. I have had my own issues when I started running this adventure. I got quite annoyed that there was not enough information on Neverwinter. Then I did some research on Neverwinter and I realised why they didn't do it. You could prepare extra material on the cities, or you might decide to not even bother, depending on how much time you have available and your level of experience. Those are sort of some of the factors. I mean, essentially, if you want to get around this, going and doing extra prep is sort of the solution. But you don't necessarily have to do that, because there might be something else going on here that has nothing to do with having lots and lots of copious material that you need to use to deal with that sort of travel, or even outside of the cities to other locations. So how do you deal with these issues? We're going to start off with number 1. Number 1 is relatively simple, and I actually came across it myself. It was actually something that I was not expecting not to happen. I knew it was going to happen, in fact. Players wanting to buy mundane items is really not an issue. If you don't have those mundane items, stuff that's in the player's handbook in Phandalin, then just let them go to one of the cities, if they have the money, and buy what they want. That is never going to be a real big issue as far as I'm concerned. The biggest hassle for you is magic item shops, because magic item shops create a few complexities for dungeon masters around how many magic items they should have. Essentially, should you make them available to purchase? It's not really something we do in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and that's sort of a concept going right back to older versions of the game. So magic item shops aren't really necessary in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and the adventure is already absolutely packed with magic items, weapons, and not really so much armor, but certainly there are a few weapons in there that will help the players throughout their adventures. So you don't really need to have magic item shops. Now here's your other problem. Your players will not have enough money to buy magic items, because you'll probably put quite a high price on magic items, and they will probably resort to stealing. That's usually what tends to happen. When you start resorting to stealing it with your character, bad things happen, because dungeon masters put in consequences, which makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But there is a problem when your players don't understand that there will be a consequence, or they don't care that there is going to be a consequence, simply because they decide they want the magic items, and if they can't buy them, they will steal them. So players' characters who steal are likely to get into a fight, particularly if they do actually decide to do that, because it would be weird to not have a magic item shop or a magic shop that has significant security, because who would not steal from a magic shop? I think it would be quite common for it to happen. So therefore, whoever's looking after their magic item shop, whether it sells sort of basic items or weapons or armor, will be making sure that they can't be stolen from. This is going to lead to character consequences, like them receiving fines that they can't pay, or they might be able to pay off, which is still a bit of a problem, being held in the stocks, tortured by the townsfolk, being thrown into jail. imprisoned in, say, a crow's cage or crow's nest of some kind, or winding up on the hangman's gallows and hung or drawn and quartered, or just basically executed in some way. Now, as a dungeon master, we're always trying to avoid those sorts of outcomes. This is sort of the worst case scenario for a dungeon master when they start to have to pull out those sorts of consequences. Now, who's likely to present these sorts of things to you? Who's likely to wind up wanting magic items in particular and resort to stealing? It's going to be your video gamers, so those people who are coming in from playing video games like Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, stuff like that, and now they're playing Dungeons and Dragons because somebody said it's a cool game and you should give it a go, or maybe they always wanted to play the game and now they have that opportunity. Also, the 3.5 and 4e Dungeons and Dragons players will simply not understand a lack of magic shops in the world. In fact, they're probably going to make quite a lot of noise, but don't let them make you feel stink for not including magic item shops in your world. There might be a very good reason. Magic items might be something that you really need to go to a private auction, and not everybody's going to be invited. It might be that magic items are so rare in your world that you don't just go and buy them, you actually have to go and find them. This is really sort of the concept behind magic items in Dungeons and Dragons 5e. You go and you find these magic items, you don't just go to a shop and purchase them. So what's my recommendation? I recommend not including magic item shops whatsoever in your world. Just don't put them in. And retrain your players' expectations. This is going to take some time. Don't expect all of your issues to be solved all at once, because they won't, but players can be retrained to think differently. You just have to take a bit of time and start presenting things in a different way. So now you explain that magic items are so rare, you have to explore and look around to find these things. You can't just walk into a shop and lay down your cash. So that was pretty much the first issue we needed to deal with. Number 2 is board players are not always a reflection of what the dungeon master is doing, but it could be what you're doing. And I'm not here to beat up on you with regard to you taking on the mantle, particularly for the first time as a dungeon master or picking it up after many years. That's not my job and not my intention. I'm just going to explain what's going on and how you can go about dealing with that issue. I want you to think about this. Could the players be tired from work or school rather than actually being bored with the game or the adventure? That's always a possibility. I found that to be often the case, particularly for people who can only play for a short period of time, a limited number of times a month. It's often a sort of a fight between life and Dungeons and Dragons, and they only have so much energy when they finally get to the game table. Are your Dungeons and Dragons players just really hard to please? Maybe their expectation of what they want to get out of this whole process is just a little bit unreasonable. You won't know at this present time, but you're going to find out. Could the Dungeon Master do something better? Is there something that you're doing in the game that would improve the experience? And when I say let's improve the experience, it's not about doing a lot. It may be simply about making slight adjustments. Is the Lost Mine of Phandelver the right adventure for the players? These are all questions. I know you're wondering, why am I presenting lots of questions? Well, all these questions have pretty much the same answer, and I'm leaving the answer to the end. So that's what you need to think about. Is the Lost Mine of Phandelver the right adventure for the players? If you've got somebody who's been watching Critical Role and is a fan and came into the game from watching Matt Mercer and the Critical Role team, are you dealing with a sort of an issue around player expectation? So are the players expecting Matt Mercer as their dungeon master? And if they are, well, there's something we need to talk about. Last pretty much on our list of sort of things that you need to ask in terms of questions. Did you have a session 0 at the very beginning before you started your campaign? Before you started running the Lost Mine of Phandelver, did you sit down, did you take some time, it didn't need to be the whole session, and actually talk about the player's expectations and the Dungeon Master's expectations? Did you actually do that? If you left that out, that is going to create a whole lot of these problems as well. Certainly around board players and what they're expecting out of the experience. So what is the answer? Very simple. Like almost all YouTube channels, they will say, talk to your players and ask them these questions. That's why I've put these questions out. Okay, you go and you ask those questions and you get an answer for those questions from them. If they don't give you an answer, well, that's another issue in itself. I can't do very much about the issue of players simply not giving you feedback when you need it. Once you've asked these questions, then you have an opportunity to address those questions and deal with those issues. And there are lots of videos out there, because all these different topics and questions that I've talked about have multiple layers to them, okay? Otherwise, if you can't ask the questions, or you're not getting answers to those questions, or you're still completely lost as to what's going on and why your players are bored, my suggestion to you is change how you are dungeon mastering in some small way and see what happens. You do not need to make huge sweeps and changes to the way you run the game. You don't have to go and spend hours preparing. You do not need to become a professional voice actor. You do not need to study Matt Mercer hour after hour, or Chris Perkins, or anything like that. All you need to do is make some small changes that you think would improve the game and make it more interesting for your players as they are going through the adventure. That is it. Very, very simple. Okay, issue number 3. Players wanting to explore the cities or some other location might suggest that a different adventure would be a better choice. But there are some problems with this, right? It's all very well saying, well, you know, should have run a different adventure. But yet again, I'm going to present you with a whole bunch of questions, and near the end, I'm going to present you with a solution that pretty much answers all those questions and deals with the issue. Are your players expecting too much freedom in your world? So much freedom, in fact, that you cannot deliver it. So you need to ask that question. That's the first question. What about, we were talking about different adventures. Would the adventure Waterdeep Dragon Heist be a better choice than the Lost Mine of Phandelver? Is that something they would be far more interested in? Yet again, going back to session 0, we should have established that way back then before you started running the campaign. Is the Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage likely to appeal to the players more as an adventure compared to the Lost Mine of Phandelver? So another question to ask yourself and feed onto the players and get them to answer those questions. Now, I would like to make it perfectly clear that none of these adventures that I've talked about, Waterdeep Dragon Heist or Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, none of these adventures that I'm suggesting are suitable for beginner dungeon masters, by the way. I'm sure there'll be somebody who will argue the point and say, I'm a beginner dungeon master and I ran them, but they are not designed for beginner dungeon masters. They are specifically not. They are hundreds of pages of material that you have to prepare and deal with. So as a result, not a beginner adventure whatsoever. So just because they might be better options doesn't mean as a beginner dungeon master they are necessarily the thing you should go and pick up. I would suggest leaving those sorts of adventures to experienced dungeon masters. You do not need to be Chris Perkins or Matt Mercer or anything like that, but you probably will need to have a bit of experience, and you'll need a significant amount of time to prepare those adventures because they are hardback and they are thick. There's a lot of content in them to deal with. Another question to ask yourself, Do you have the skills and desire to improvise your adventure? If they decide to go outside of the realm of the Lost Mine of Phandelver, can you deal with that? Are you prepared and willing and capable to improvise? If you are, then you can move forward and we don't need to worry about anything else. That's great news. Question to ask yourself. Another question. Do you have the time to create a homebrew adventure? Do you actually have time to sit down and prepare something of your own that is not the Lost Mine of Phandelver, that deals with wherever the players have decided they want to roam to? If you can do that, then great, there's an option for you. Okay, here's the last answer I have. Your solution, if none of the things I have talked about are going to work for you, this is the one you want to pick up. I would recommend to you to make it explicit to your players that you have sat down, you've spent time, you are running the Lost Mine of Phandelver. You talked about it in your session 0, you talked about it before you started running the campaign, and there are limits to what you can manage as a dungeon master. And I would say this is where beginner and new dungeon masters need to sort of sit. You need to sit down and make it really explicit to players who want to go and explore other locations and cities where you're just not capable of dealing with that, just not willing to do that, or just don't have the skill level, or it's just too frightening. Just make it explicit that you can't deal with that level of complexity. Not yet. Maybe later on, but not in your first foray, not at the first time you start dungeon mastering. Now, I'm hoping this video was helpful to people. If it was, fantastic. I have a playlist, a huge series of videos on the Lost Mine of Phandelver for Dungeon Masters. It's a Dungeon Master guide. You're welcome to go and check those videos out. It should cover pretty much everything you need. If it doesn't, someday I'm hoping I will cover all the things I'm supposedly needing to cover. But so far there is quite a few videos. If you aren't interested in the Lost Mine of Phandelver, but you're still looking for some sort of feedback from me, I have videos for players and dungeon masters covering every aspect of the game. You're welcome to go and see those videos if you want to. If you want to support the channel so I keep doing content like this, I have a Patreon page. I have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon if you buy stuff online, and I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos. You're welcome to check those out. Make sure to share, like and subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live, and I go live a lot, and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. I'm just going to check my glasses to see if they're working properly. And be interesting to see if the camera... Yeah, there we go. I need a drink of water. I've been talking for a long time. How long has it been? At least 20 minutes. God. As I said, I will answer questions on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It doesn't have to be about the topic for today. I will answer player questions if I'm able to. My glasses aren't working. I will also answer questions on generic stuff for Dungeon Masters if they want to. It's really... This is your opportunity to have a chat with somebody. And you get me for today. All right. So Henry, Dan, okay, so he's going to check that out later on. Prepared to cook and survive. Hi Fred. Hi. All my question is traveling to other planes. Planes. I'm assuming you mean like other dimensional planes rather than plans. As a newbie GM and DM, would you just go to the Rift at Neverwinter? I know I'm only limited by my imagination, but I'd like to keep it. Okay, so can I just say that you can do whatever you like. If you're prepared to deal with traveling to different planes, then do that. If you've got stuff prepared, fine. If you want to move the adventure away from the Lost Mine of Phandelver and Phandalin, then so be it. You can do that. I do have a video that talks about the next adventure after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and you might find that useful if you haven't already watched it. I would say to you that an adventure that's already pre-made, such as Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, has a dungeon underneath Waterdeep. But the thing about it is a lot of the levels could be portrayed as travelling to another plane, and certainly could allow you doors to another world. You can put a door or a rift or a portal wherever you like, anywhere in the world. It's really up to you. You do not need to stick to something that has been put down in canon. Okay? If Neverwinter is the one you want to go for, then do that. It's up to you, really. What other portals exist or spells, etc. Right, so Gate, I would say Gate would allow you to get to a lot of other different locations, but as I said, something like the Dungeon of the Mad Mage has the opportunity to sort of allow you to travel through portals to different levels within the dungeon, but why not other worlds, different locations within the multiverse itself. Okay, I'm hoping that answered your question. Cheers, guys. You're new. If I've answered your question, Cook and Survive, I'm glad. Okay, so I've already said hi to Scott. Joe is here. I've already talked to dancers. Francis. Okay, what do you got here? Really interested to get your input on this. I was just deciding to abandon Tyranny of Dragons at level 3 and jump in a mix I made of Lost Mines and Dragon of Ice by a Peak. Okay, and then you're going to go level 6 to Storm King's Thunder. Well, you can do this. I don't think it would be a bad idea. If you feel that's sort of where you want to go, is that where your players want to go? That's a question I would ask you. If you're going to abandon the Tyranny of Dragons for whatever reason, and I can totally understand why you would want to do that, are your players invested in picking up the Lost Mine of Phandelver and adventuring in that location? Or dealing with the Dragon of Ice by a Peak, which of course still takes place around Phandalin itself. Storm King's Thunder seems like and was designed to fit and integrate into the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It is actually designed to do that. Does it do that well for a new Dungeon Master? I wouldn't say so. You will find walls of text in Storm King's Thunder which make it very difficult to navigate and find information as you're running that adventure. I only ran a couple of sessions of Storm King's Thunder. One of my friends Dungeon Mastered this adventure. He did not speak kindly of the adventure itself. I thought it would be fine because it had a flowchart in it. But things like Dragon of Ice by a Peak have their own weaknesses, but it's easy to find the information that's actually there. You've got 2 pages, a map, and some written text with lots of headers, as you know, to find the material. And also, the Lost Mine of Phandelver is structured in such a way that usually you can find the information, if it's in the adventure, you can find it where you need to look. It's really clear where you should look to find that information. It's not scattered throughout the entire booklet. I'm hoping that answered your question, Francis. If it did not, or got your name wrong, I do apologise. Salty Soap, I'm not quite sure what that's meaning, but okay. What do you got here, John? I wanted to add additional thunder and lightning options to the Tempest Cleric, like the cantrip Thunderclap. Do you see any issues with that? There are always issues, John, when you add a new spell to the spell list. I play wizards and I love playing wizards. I like casting spells. I like that kind of versatility. And as a result of that, I know right now that with the spells that are available in the player's handbook and not looking at any of the supplements, really you can do pretty much everything you need to do. There is some more spells coming out in the new book that sort of deal with adjusting time, which is quite an interesting concept, but also a very dangerous one, because I know every time my players have dealt with time travel and adjusting time, it's caused some interesting but troublesome issues. It doesn't always do this, but it can. So there's always going to be a possibility of causing issues. I think you'll find that if you're building a cantrip and you base it on the damage output of an existing cantrip, it really won't be an issue because you are only building a cantrip. You're not building a level 1, 2, 3 or upward spell. It's just a cantrip. So if you base it on something else and you just make it possible for it to do a different type of damage, I don't think there's going to be an issue. But as I said, you will never know what's going to happen until you test it. And of course, you have to test it in your own game. Hi Scott, how's it going? I'd just play a cleric of Talos the Destroyer instead. The Tempest. Yeah, the Tempest domain. Yeah, why not? I had somebody come to me at one point and want to play a Storm Sorcerer, but actually do sort of Storm Sorcery kinds of spells that cause that kind of damage. You know, a bit more versatility, such as a bit more range in terms of cold damage, lightning and thunder, and they felt there wasn't a big enough range, particularly at higher levels. And I'm not going to argue the point with anybody on that because you know, they felt there was sort of some restrictions on that. But I can tell you now that you will find that taking an existing spell and simply changing the name and changing the damage type is probably the simplest and easiest and least likely to cause you strife issue, because you're really not doing much more than changing the name of the spell and the damage type, and that's it. The mechanics are going to be identical to a pre-existing spell that's already been play tested. Okay. Elliot likes the live stream. Excellent, thank you, Elliot. DDoom33. Will this be available on VOD on YouTube later? Yes, it will be. I'm pretty sure if you're still here, it's always going to be available later, but it's unlisted. Like I said, you need to be subscribed, hit the bell button, and turn on notifications to be able to get access to the unlisted live streams later on. Otherwise, you can't get hold of it. But if you wait, you will get the edited version if you wait a few days, or you can be a patron and just get access to them and you don't have to worry about being bombarded. Because when you turn on notifications, right, every channel that you have clicked the bell on was also going to throw notifications at you. YouTube can only throw 3 notifications at you in any given day. So that means that if you are subscribed and hit the bell button and you've got turned on notifications, only 3 of those channels will send you a notification, and the other ones you won't be able to access, particularly if they have unlisted YouTube videos, which I often do. Frog Bacon, hi, how's it going? Seth, I think I already said hi to Seth. Gray, hi. Oh gosh, my eyes are Fabelo? Gosh, my eyes are terrible today. 007, how's it going? What a good name. Solstice. Dancers, you like the meme? Well, yes. I thought it was appropriate for those people who felt like, you know, we have to give them a sandbox. You don't always have to give your players a sandbox. You got to think about the Lost Mine of Phandelver as there are sort of little pathways. They can do it in any order they like. Okay, they can do these different little adventures, these little side quests, or the one that follows the main sort of storyline in any order they like. But within that area, it's now like a sandbox, you know, whether that be sort of like a dungeon or a castle or some caves or whatever. There is room to sort of make decisions. You don't always have to, it's not the same pathway you would follow. You can do it different ways. You like this video, dancers? That's good, excellent. What's that, Elliot? If you ever get to the US in New Jersey, you can stay at my house and I can play some one-shots. Fair enough, Elliot. We can stream there as well. Well, I would imagine that the streaming quality in New Jersey is probably better than Helensville in New Zealand. Even if I do have fibre and the highest end fibre for residential. I still imagine that the States has got better services than I do here in New Zealand. Okay, Grey Dawn. You're currently running it. Okay, well that's good. All the best with that. Remember, if you have questions, Dungeon Master questions, player questions, I'm almost to the end of the Q&A, which means, or the bottom of the chat box, which means as soon as I get to the bottom, I'm leaving. So you need to throw out questions if you want me to stay longer. I need to drink some water though. Elliot's beer is cold and his dice are hot. Well, hopefully not so hot they melt. Be Saucy, how's it going? Ahoy, mate. Okay, what did I just miss somebody? Did I skip past somebody? I felt like I did. I'm trying to work through this. What do you got here, Joe? This is a great video, Fred. Spot on. Well, Joe, I'm glad you agreed that it covered all bases. Can I just say, it was really hard to put this together. I really found it difficult. It really tested me. And I didn't know how to make it shorter too. That was the difficult aspect. Be Saucy, it's perfect. My players just left Phandalin for the first time to go to Thunder Tree. Oh, all the best with that. What do you got here, Scott? I have a player that believes there should be a shop for magic on every corner. Basically, he gets grumpy when I make him earn them by adventuring. Yes, now, Scott, you can adjust a person's perspective on that, but you have to understand the time frame for adjusting a player's understanding of the acquisition of magic items. The length of time it will take is how long is a piece of string. There's no knowing how long it will take. But if they keep playing with you and you keep adopting this and you stick to your guns, they will either leave your table and go and play with another Dungeon Master who will just shower them with magic items, or they will learn to adjust to how you are running the game. Dancers need a health potion? Sure. This one is red. Well, see, here's the thing. Healing potions aren't a big deal. You know, those, and I have had magic shops in my campaigns. I found the best types of magic shops to present in Dungeons & Dragons 5e are the ones that do not include permanent magic items that have to do with rings, armor, wands, rods, and weapons. Instead, you sell consumable magic items, things that are not quite as powerful and not going to be as useful for as long. In other words, things like potions and scrolls, things that can only be used once, essentially. You can burn up their money and they still get the benefit of being able to go and buy something cool, but it isn't there permanently. Whereas, you know, like a magic sword is always going to be there, and weapon, you know, armor is probably the most tricky magic item to include in a game, simply because there are very few ways other than casting spells to improve armor class, and small tweaks to your armor make a huge effect compared to a small adjustment to your attack bonus or your damage bonus. Those don't really make the biggest difference. I found that the one that players always seek is the armor one because it doesn't come up very often. The assumption is that there are very few magic suits of magic armor floating around in an adventure, whether you have it created by yourself as the Dungeon Master or in a pre-existing adventure. So therefore they always want that one in particular. Pearsham, how's it going, mate? Tom Miller, hi, how's it going? Once again, I'm missing Fred's live stream because I was DMing. Don't worry, Fred, I'm not ending the session to watch. We ended at the top of the hour. I will have to re-watch the beginning later. Okay, that's good. Good. I would not want you to go and do that. That would be a bad thing. Rivers RPG channel. Hi, how's it going, Rivers? Enoch. I think I've got Enoch Green Sock. What do you got here? On Saturday, my party will return to where they were in the Red Brand hideout. They'll resume speaking to the Norfolk. Oh, good. So they're actually talking to the Norfolk. Cool. So they'll be travelling outside of Phandalin soon. I suppose fortuitous. Yeah, well, it's probably a topic I should have covered a long time ago, but it didn't really occur to me. It actually occurred to me when another dungeon master was asked this question and they really didn't have an answer for people. And I thought, actually, maybe I can answer that question. I wrote down 3 different things on a piece of paper and I thought, well, this is easy. This is going to be a piece of cake. No, it was not easy, because when I untangled it, I realized it was much more complicated, which is probably why so many people have jumped in today. Okay, what else? Be Saucy, my party is going to Thunder Tree to find Redoth. Now, I haven't done a video on that druid, have I? Well, they don't have to find the druid. They don't have to find him. That's really up to you. I wanted to use the druid simply because there really aren't a lot of NPCs they can talk to in that location. You could say there are 3 possible NPCs or monsters they could talk to in that location. But I felt like he was sort of the only major ally as far as I was concerned. So I wanted to sort of include him. Howdy, Mr. Wheeler. Late to the party. Oh, well, Jess, that's all right. Jesse, no problems. What are your thoughts on adding a time crunch to the narrative? Maybe add a bit of unease to a party bent on leaving an area. Look, I've heard of dungeon masters who have added a time crunch to rescuing Gundren Rockseeker. And the rationale behind that is that, eventually something bad was going to happen to him. So if they left it too long, then Gundren Rockseeker was no more. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So you can add time crunches. Time crunches and time frames and time limits to achieve something are a good thing. It stops players from getting distracted on things they shouldn't be focusing on. It also makes it clear to them that they can fail. Even if they are still alive and they didn't die, and their characters didn't die, not them as players, that would be crazy, right? But if they can still fail if they leave things too long. So put in a time frame by all means if you feel that will be helpful. But I wouldn't be too strict on it, because you're probably going to be dealing with new players, because usually when people play Lost Mine of Phandelver, it's the very first adventure they ever run as a dungeon master or play as a player. And so therefore, give them a bit of leeway. That would be my advice. Ralph, how's it going? Question. One of my players accused me of railroading the group because they were outsmarted by Succubus. Okay, so what is the question? How should I handle said player? Okay, so Ralph, I'm gonna tell you what's gonna happen. You've been told you're railroading by one player, but that's only one player. Did all the other players think you were railroading them, or is it just this one player? Did you actually create a railroad for them? So you need to answer that question. If you never created a railroad, then let it be. Okay, move on. If the player can't move on, they'll either leave your group or they'll stay with you and they'll forgive you and move on. It is not unusual for even experienced dungeon masters to have a player come up to them and say, or during the session say, that was a railroad, didn't it? You made a railroad. There was nowhere we could go. We only had one path and that was it. And that may be the case and that might not be the case. Okay? So just because it's happening to you, Ralph, does not mean that it's something you need to get too upset about. I would have a talk to them if there were multiple options and say, look, there were actually alternatives, but you didn't pick up those alternatives. You took one choice and that was it. Okay? And if you had done something slightly differently, something different would have happened. If that wasn't the case, then it is a railroad. But, a railroad is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you actually need to have them. Otherwise, it's too difficult for a dungeon master to manage. Not everybody can just go and wing it and improvise absolutely everything all the time. Sometimes that's just too hard. So that would be my advice. Have a talk to them, okay, and have that discussion. Pearsham, succubus, yes. What have I got here? Prepared to cook and survive. Thanks, Fred. Okay, so I answered your question. Great. All right. I wouldn't necessarily suggest doing what Pearsham has said, saying tough. But you know, it it is what it is. Sometimes there is a railroad, and sometimes there isn't. And sometimes players think there is a railroad, and there never was. And that's happened to me too. And it will happen to other dungeon masters. Trust me. It's a critical. Hi, how's it going? Ben, what do you got here? Hey man, I keep missing your show. I got questions, bro. Well, Ben, throw those questions out, mate. Start throwing them into the chat so I can start answering them. I feel like I'm getting close to the bottom, or maybe I'm not. Are you guys going to try and keep me here for an hour? I feel like that you're going to keep me here for an hour. Okay, so I'm going to answer your questions. Don't worry. You have to stay here with us forever. Be saucy, you're being cruel to me now. Cool Keg Computer. Hey Fred, it's been a while. Yes, it has. A friend is thinking about hosting a campaign, but we'd play mostly online. Discord, Skype. Any tips to make sure it's successful? I am the wrong person to ask advice on running a campaign online. I just don't do that. And as a result, I'm not the best person to ask that question of. There is actually somebody who would be a really good person to ask. I don't know that you'll necessarily get much of an answer from him, but I would say, now I have a lot of channels that are featured on my channel, and I would go and ask AJ Pickett. He's featured on my channel. He does a live stream every week. If you can get into his live stream, then my suggestion to you is ask him, because he doesn't live stream as such, but he plays online, should I say. And he can give you some really good advice around that, because he actually does that. And I know him. We do communicate with each other, so I would suggest chatting with him. Pearsham, Fred, what's the sound of one hand clapping? I think it's like this, isn't it? There is no sound. Okay. Michelle, I think it's Michelle. I'm 24 and have my first game. I'm DMing, and your videos have helped me so much. Thanks. Michelle Mincy, you're welcome. I'm glad they have been helpful. I'm glad they have been useful to you. All right. Thank you, Pearsham. I'm glad you like my stuff. Lots of cats and stuff for the... Okay. All right. Safe dance. Okay, it's a critical. What's your favourite setting in Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, all right, I'll answer that question. Ben, keep writing those questions in if you have those questions, okay? I will get to them. And anybody else who has questions. So my favourite campaign that's pre-existing is Dark Sun. I would like to... Now, somebody gave me a super chat. I don't know who it is, but thank you very much. If I find you, and I'm shortly, I should be at the bottom here pretty quick. But thank you for the $5, and I'll get you real quick. I want to sort of get to everybody if I can. But I didn't ignore... I'm not trying to ignore you, but I did see the super chat pop up. So what my favourite setting is Dark Sun. The problem with Dark Sun is I've found that dungeon masters, like myself, really love Dark Sun. I like Dark Sun. A lot of other dungeon masters like Dark Sun. But Dark Sun is not necessarily a campaign world that players like. And that's where I found things unravel for me. Because it's such a different flavour and world compared to your normal vanilla fantasy. You know, your vanilla fantasy is Faerun and the Forgotten Realms and the likes of something like Midgard or something like Middle Earth, those sorts of things. You know, even Eberron, even though it's steampunky and got technology in it, is sort of more easy to digest. Dark Sun for players is hard to digest. But that's my favourite. Lord of the Dance. Ooh, I don't know. I hadn't. Is there a campaign world called Lord of the Dance? Safety Dance. Okay. Old school Ravenloft was cool. Yeah, I did. I've run the old Ravenloft adventure. Save or die crit. Rivers Cujo. All right. Okay. Hi. How's it going? Spelljammer was the shiznits. I love Spelljammer, and yes, I did run a Spelljammer campaign at one point, but I still like Dark Sun. I don't know why. My players really liked Spelljammer, travelling in a little sort of ship from place to place through the Astral Sea. Went down well. Okay. Is it Mitchell? Hi, Mitchell. It's Mitchell, not Michelle. Sorry. My eyes are not very good. Dear. Oh, it's Be Saucy. Thank you, mate. Thank you so much for the $5. Mitchell, what's the best way to give my players a little fear? I don't want to have them die, but I want one player who does a lot of cocky stuff and acts like there is no way the PCs could die. It's very simple. You just knock players down. You know, it's probably the easiest way. Look, I did a video on how to create horror in your Dungeons and Dragons game, and that's sort of around Halloween, but you could apply it to any game. I always find that if you do something that really shocks them and surprises them, I have on many occasions, I cook my frogs slowly. Okay, I cook my players slowly. I always throw very easy encounters at them, and they start to roll through those easily. They get more and more difficult. Then over time, once they have developed a certain degree of cockiness, I throw something at them that is just downright too hard for them to manage. And I expect them to run away, but I know they won't necessarily run away. But then I'm not married to character death, you know. I've talked about that before. So it's not like I'm there to polish off characters, because even though a character will die, even if they can't bring it back themselves through their own means, I will let them continue playing that character. I will just add in a complication, that's all. So do something surprising. Make things a bit harder. It's really simple. It's not that difficult. All you got to do is just keep increasing the difficulty, and stop making your combats, if it's around combat you're worried about, stop making your combats about who lives and dies. Put in objectives, things they have to achieve. It's not good enough to survive, and it's not good enough to kill the monsters. You have to make sure that something else that's taking place doesn't happen while you're doing your battle, if that's what you're talking about. Pearsham, have the fighters get hit with a staff of withering. Okay, what's that, Ralph? Thanks for the feedback, Fred. Appreciate your advice. You're welcome, mate. No, don't take their powers. That's not nice. I got to the bottom. I'm now almost at the bottom of the chat. I'm almost there. Alex, how's it going? Hi, Fred. If you're familiar with Curse of Strahd, yes, I am. But I want to see how you would handle a situation I was put in. First session as a DM, and my players accepted Strahd's dinner invitation with Irina. Okay, here is what I would suggest to you. Alex, your suggestion? I would not have Strahd try to capture Irina. I would not even have a battle take place with Strahd. If they are going to have a dinner invitation with Strahd, let that play out, okay? If anything, Strahd can learn more about them, and remember, Strahd likes to toy with his food before he eats it. So I would certainly play that out. He might sort of present in a way as being sort of a normal sort of nobleman, nothing unusual. I would certainly do that, because the players are expecting something else. So I would go with the absolute opposite. I would lull them into a false sense of security, if I can, to think that Strahd might not be such a bad guy. That maybe my dungeon master is not going to have Strahd be the nasty, evil vampire that he is. But of course, That's not true. But the longer you keep throwing that at your players, the more and more you will confuse the hell out of them. Okay, and that's fun, that's complicated, and that will really sort of spice things up, because Strahd can use other means that aren't necessarily linked to him. They might be linked to him, but they won't necessarily know that they're linked to him to actually cause strife for them. And there's enough going on in the Curse of Strahd that they don't even have to deal with Strahd in a battle that often. But you do definitely want to present Strahd as often as you possibly can and have those interactions. A battle with him would be stupid, so always have plenty of ways for him to escape and back up should he require it. There should always be something held back in the wings. That would be my suggestion to you. Fred knows all about Strahd. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I think there's a couple of people who know a lot more than me. Picks charge. He won't always charge. If you ask him questions, he will tend to answer the questions that are super chatted, because he has so many people in his live streams. But he does answer questions that people have if you put them out there, okay? Just don't spam the question. All right. Okay, what else we got here? Dark Sun was pretty brutal. Yes, Dark Sun is brutal. Yeah, DMing Dark Sun is fun. Playing in Dark Sun, I can kind of understand why people might be not quite so happy about the idea. Trying to start a new campaign. This is Alex in Eberron, okay? Any ideas where to start connecting the dots in terms of the story and a bad guy? Not really. I haven't run any campaigns in Eberron, although my players, I got one player who wants me to definitely do it. He wants Eberron, let's do Eberron, had enough of the Forgotten Realms. I totally understand that, but I'm not ready to do that. I know part of the reason why they want to play, or he wants to play in Eberron, is the Artificer, and I don't really want to touch the Artificer with a 10-foot pole. I've already had campaigns where there were lots and lots of magic items, and people could craft magic items, and you could buy magic items, but you could certainly craft them. I already know the issues, because I've already made those mistakes with Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I literally did it in a campaign to see what would happen. And I can tell you it was not fun for me. In the end, I just sort of let the campaign die. And there are no simple solutions that don't involve annoying the hell out of your players. It just doesn't happen. You might get some players that are understanding, but I found that I had a range of different players and it didn't work. It just didn't work. Pesham. Isn't there a couple of modules in the Eberron book? Yes, there is a very, very short, as it happens. I wouldn't say a couple of modules. I think it's like one adventure in the Eberron book, the Last War. Okay, but that's about it as far as I remember. Chris, hi Chris. Thoughts on adding homebrew magical items to a hardcovers? Okay, so here's the thing. I would certainly do it. And I did it in my own campaigns. I have a few characters entering Curse of Strahd later. How would I bring them in? I was just finishing House of Death. Okay, so here's the first thing. Going from the Death House into Curse of Strahd should be easy, because really the Death House is located in Barovia. So that shouldn't be an issue. Okay, they can't get out of Barovia easily, so the transition should be pretty quick and easy. And you can put the House of Death wherever you like, but I would just put it beside the village of Barovia. There's really not much else you have to do. There aren't too many individuals the players' characters can talk to in Barovia anyway, but they will pick up the scent that, okay, Irina needs assistance, and Strahd, everybody doesn't like Strahd. Okay, that they will pick that up if you play it out with what you've got in the book. As for adding in magical homebrew items, I would always stick to common ones that don't have a combat focus. These are not the magic items that players really want to see in your game, but they add a lot of interest and entertainment. And I know things like an ale cup that never runs out of ale, or a jug or a flask or something like that is quite popular. There are lots of things in, now which one is it? There's a supplement that has a whole lot of rather cute and unusual magic items that aren't really sort of overpowered, that you could certainly include. I think it's Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I could be wrong, but I think it's that one. There's a whole section on common magic items. Now, they are already pre-existing, but you could use them as sort of an idea of where to go with that. I always found that if I'm going to add a magic item that's got some power to it, I need to put in something that is sort of counterbalances that. Otherwise, what happens is players' characters are already very, very powerful once they hit level 5, and magic items just make that even more difficult to manage, and you have to ramp everything up. And of course, if somebody doesn't have a magic item and somebody else does, then it's easy for the person with the magic item or magic weapon or magic armor, and those who don't have one yet or have it yet, they find it harder. So those are things to sort of think about. I've done videos on how to deal with magic items. There's a bunch of videos on that. I tend to stick with the magic items that are kind of quirky. Prepared to cook and survive. Just keep refreshing till you stop talking about Strahd. Laugh out loud. Oh, thank you very much. What else we've got here? Alex, thank you, Fred. I wish I would have handled it like that. That's all right, Alex. It's now you know. It's all practice, and you should never worry about the fact that you didn't handle it that way. I should do another video saying it's all right to sort of make mistakes as a dungeon master, because we don't really see that message on YouTube, do we? We always get videos on the worst mistakes that dungeon masters can make, or the top 5 or top 10 techniques and strategies that dungeon masters should use, rather than saying it's all right to make mistakes. It's always apparently not all right to make mistakes, but I don't believe that. Prepared to cook and survive. Can someone let me know when Fred stops talking about Strahd, please? Oh, God. Okay. If you were going to add anything to Curse of Strahd shops, because there's not a lot, what would you add? I would probably add a novelty shop. When I think about a shop that would make sense in the Curse of Strahd, it's a novelty shop full of things that are more akin to the trinkets that you would find in the trinket table in the player's handbook. And I would certainly go with shrunken head, a deformed petrified hand, those sorts of things. I added a lot of additional toys into Blinsky's toy shop. They already sort of detailed quite a lot of really peculiar things, but I added a lot more to that. But that's what I would add, is I would add in a sort of an antique shop full of really peculiar items that aren't necessarily magical. In fact, they probably won't be magical, but they have a story behind them, and they might be related to, or something that the NPCs within the story might find useful if a player decides to purchase it and offer it to them, or they might be looking for that particular item that got lost. That's what I would do, is go with an antique shop. Alex, if you were going to add anything to... Okay, I answered that question. What if my players will run Curse of Strahd for me after Lost Mine of Phandelver, so I get a break? Don't want to spoil it. Okay, alright, yes, if you need to take off, you go for it, mate. I understand. Yeah, DMs can make mistakes, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, I think a lot of people forget that nobody's perfect going out the front door, and you are allowed to make mistakes, and not everybody picks up on everything. And players make mistakes, dungeon masters make mistakes. New and beginner dungeon masters are allowed to make mistakes, and for as long as it needs be, honestly. And I'm done, and I am going to go because otherwise I'm going to pass out. I am ready to pass out now as it happens. Thank you to everybody who showed up for the live stream. Hopefully it all sort of held together as best it could. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, afternoon, night, early morning, look after your family, your friends, and yourself and your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.